I understand the T-72B and all that shit. The thing is this, what you're initially seeing are columns of tanks that are recon going through, and yes, they're going to get fucking shot up. That's part of the job. I was in Cav. We know this shit. And that's the thing about it, is that somebody's got to go forward first. The last thing they're going to do is put the best tank going up there first, ever. Because if it gets handed over or if it gets captured, now you've lost your best equipment to your enemy. This is, I understand you're not dunking on them, but I don't think that people appreciate the type of warfare that's happening right now. It isn't like they can mass an armored fist because there's miles of prepared trench line that had to be penetrated first. As they get closer to getting to the back of Bakhmut and stuff, now we'll see. You know, I may be wrong, but
I think he's saying something different, Meddy, because we know how it works. We know how Cav works, and we have some units of Cav in the Marine Corps. We know all about it, especially RMOS. We work with Cavs, but if you're given a mission to do something and the outcome is totally effed up, and the primal objective was not right, that's where the problem comes from. If Russia does a better initial push and maybe doesn't take even losses on their weak shit, I think it turns out better. I think, I mean, I'm in the middle in this, but when I saw the initial, when it opened up, I was like, why are they doing this? It's so weird. To me, it looked strange. I was like, if I had to command these units, I would not give up this platoon to die for nothing. Like my brain was like, wow, these guys just lost this much armor, these many men, and objectively they won nothing. I don't care what anybody tells me. In the beginning, I was like, oh, maybe it was to kind of set the Ukrainians up. But then the more I looked into it, I was like, you could have used those things a little bit better. And now I'm in that side, like human lives are more important than what they gained from the initial push. And to me, it's irreversible. Their mistake is unbelievable. But now that's just me.
I think it is reversible, but not in the short term. Over months and years, they can replace and reconstitute all of that equipment.
Oh, I'm talking about human life, though. You can't.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't like, if I'm a squad leader, and I knew for 3 deployments, if I send that guy over the trench and he dies and it's not worth it, it's going to be in my heart forever. So when I saw what Russia did with some of these units, I was like, come on, man. Come on. This is not, you don't play with human life like that. Yes, the armor can be brought back.
I don't think they were playing with human life, though. That's the thing. That's
some of the things
we're
in my opinion.
And I get it, but and that's the thing, though. We're comparing them to our army. It's not the same thing. You're looking at them through westernized, they're driven by our standards, and that's the whole thing. They do, you know. I'm not saying it's a bad. I understand your agreement. You can laugh at me if you want, but you know, I trained for doing that shit. But
saying you're right.
I'm getting. Hold on. Dude, I'm going PTSD right now. So just give me a moment, all right? Because this is what's happening in this moment right now. It's me, not you guys. So you're talking truth. I get what you're saying, both of you. So let me back up. I see it a different way because I've been trained in it a different way at a different time during the Cold War when these types of large engagements were a possibility. There was different jobs than the way you were trained now. You weren't trained about going against 400 tanks at once. We were. You know what I mean? That was a reality for us. War was against the Russians was the reality, not taken away from anything that our soldiers did in Afghanistan or Iraq. I don't want to go in any place and kicking down doors. I'll tell you right now. I'll leave that to better men than me. That was you two or whoever. That is not me. I'm not that brave. I like to hide in a tank, but I understood the job. And I see it a lot differently because I think we're judging things as they're happening and we're not getting in the objective space of time where, you know what, I could be completely wrong and I'm here getting all pissed off at you. And history will find out where we are. And I bet you we're all in the middle probably, because we're all going by tea leaves. None of us know actually what the real numbers are. None of us know actually what Russian MOD plans are. Nobody actually knows what their initial operational planning was. But I think now we're seeing the beginning of the offensive is going to begin. It's actually started, I think. And soon we'll see an armored fist somewhere. I say Kherson region, but I could be wrong.
Well, just to basically sum up where I was going with mentioning that, because it isn't just to talk about Russian tank losses, which we have covered before, I believe, but it's not just about equipment that kind of confirms what we're talking about, or you could say just Russian strategy across the board ever since General Surovikin took charge. You know, the strategy's carrying through with Gerasimov, right? Russia is fighting much more conservatively than they were at the start of the war. They're being much more careful with their men, with their material, with their air assets, everything. And they're committed to this slow grinding war against the Ukrainian army, not a geographic war, not a war of encirclement, basically just a war of annihilation against the Ukrainian army. And that might develop, you know, once the Ukrainian army is attrited to a certain level, Russia might say, all right, it's go time. But frankly, I don't think we'll be able to anticipate it until the day of, because that's something that would be very sudden. If Russia did it smart, it wouldn't be something that we'd be able to put a day to, you know?
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you said.
Stalingrad was yesterday. The anniversary of Stalingrad 80 years ago. Notice operational tempo has gained, and it's getting faster, and a larger forces going in. This is the offensive. It's not going to be like bam, everybody blitzkrieg across the German line. It's not that type of thing right now, because there was a large force. They had to penetrate first to get to the interior. That's what I'm trying to say. There's two different battles that will actually have been proven to fought. Was the initial battle where they went in to take the lines. They operationally paused, changed their makeup of their army to face what the next phase was and move forward. That's what I think. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened, but I think they just if you're pushing, if you want to create static on all sides in Ukraine, which is what Russia did, I think they didn't have to push so deep in and expose themselves. That's what I'm saying. The mistakes came, Meddy, by the way. You don't want to overreach with like in my head, they just went far too deep. They got hit way too hard. And I agree with Mason about how it's just building up against the Ukrainian army. Like I've said in the chats, and I've said it many times, that Russia's going to continue to hit where the Ukrainians are most at. They want to fight in the hardest places. That's why they're fighting in Bakhmut. That's why they're fighting in these bigger urban places. They want to destroy their military, the Ukrainian military. What's up?
Look at what Prigozhin is saying. I mean, Prigozhin is.
I think the original reason for Russia to attack that way was just to get to the settlement. Because if they really wanted to attack, they should have attacked like between Kiev and Lvov and just cut off Ukraine from the west. Because they initially they could have done that. Initially, if they wanted to go that deep, they would have gone that way, and there was nothing stopping them. Because Ukraine would have run out of equipment at some point. They didn't have the navy to get supplies from the coastline. They if they were cut off from Poland, they're cut off completely. So I think if that was the initial goal, they would have done something like that. But that wasn't the initial goal, and which is kind of the reason why the original offensive failed, in my opinion. It kind of failed. It still worked out in a way that they gained some ground in the south and in the east, but I don't think that was exactly what they planned for. I think that became their plan B, but it wasn't their original plan. So that's my speculation when it comes to that. I do have one other question for you guys. So the Iron Fist that we are talking about for Ukraine, and I hear a lot of crowd going on and saying that Ukraine's going to have 2 or 3 battalions are they're going to be trained, especially on NATO equipment with all the tanks, all the Bradleys, etc. That's coming in. Is it possible for them to attack Zaporizhzhia if they have enough, all the artillery that they're saving, all the infantry vehicles they're saving, and all the tanks they're getting, they just use it at one place, which is Zaporizhzhia, which is also, as you guys said, plain ground. Do you think it is possible for them to make a breakthrough that way? Is that an option for them?
I think it's possible. Should intelligence assets fail to detect the force, and if the Russian army fails to take the proper precautions, the Russian army definitely has the capability to stop such an offensive. They have, equivalents to all of this material in the combat zone. They have direct answers to it. If for some reason it's like Kharkov and there's no Russian soldiers there, which we know isn't the case, then yeah, it could be possible. In my own opinion, I don't think it's going to happen. I think the battlefield is nothing like it was 6 months ago. It's very densely populated. I think Russia has 2 or maybe even 3 reserve lines with, armored units, air assets ready for just this. So personally, I don't think even with that force, they'll be able to do it.
Yeah, is this the push that they're talking about going to Crimea?
They want to go down and hit Melitopol, whatever.
Melitopol, yeah.
Yeah, and then they're going to hit that. Then they're going to go down to whatever. And then
from what I understand, the new missiles that they're getting, the 150-kilometer range ones, I don't know which ones they are. The idea is, from what I'm getting, is that what they're going to do, they're going to attack the Crimea bridge, not Kerch bridge, but the Crimea bridge, which connects to Kherson, and they're going to cut supply lines there. Then they're going to attack the bridge to another bridge or supply lines towards Mariupol, and then they're going to try to just do one little push as the last ditch effort towards Melitopol. Just
all right, I'll give my opinion, and then we'll move around in a circle. That way we keep it organized. What I believe is, if I was the Russian people, like the Russian military, and I see this happening, you kind of want them to put more into that. And if they see it and they know, they have the armament to stop it. They have, like Mason said, they have lines. By now, the engineers have made so many defensive positions on that area because they know it's a weak point. When you see a weak point, you reinforce it, and it no longer is a weak point, and it just goes up and down the line this way. Oh, something's wrong. So if they were to push down this area, man, the rest of their forces they would commit so much to this pointless attack, and they would only dig themselves deeper in a hole. So it's a double-edged sword for the Ukrainians. If they fail, now they're even worse off in another line. So
yeah,
I would add also, if you look at the recent amphibious assault, where the Ukrainians suddenly used a few speedboats and tried to land, and you look at how fast the Russians reacted, they are actually engaged right at the moment where they landed. No, it's not like these are very huge force. Then it's like even with just like 6 speedboats, and I think they have some land forces on the other side of the coast, preparing, to do fire support or something. I do not know, which the Russian claims that they have hit those forces on the other side of the river. To me, that is surprising because if you look at how long that front line is along the entire river, and they are managed to detect such a small force, I do not know how the Ukrainians can ever break through that line, because we already know they have 3 lines of defense along the Dnieper River. So they have the first line. That first line is meant to be abandoned should the Novakhovka dam breaks, because it will flood. Then they actually go to the second and third line. So that was what I understood. So, and maybe there will be more lines. And the fact that they can detect such a small force, which is supposed to be maybe a DRG or some kind of recon forces, and they managed to detect them, I'm very surprised. Like how they managed to do it. And it's not just this one time. There's also a few more times where we do not have this much footages and so much coverage. Like they try to land on the other end, more on the western side, and they managed to catch them. And the Ukrainians doesn't seem to have much chance to even hold some grounds. And so this to me shows how difficult it would be for for the Ukrainians to actually do their Crimea offensive, I don't think it's practical at all. Because even the Russians don't dare to go for another Kherson offensive because they can't even cross the river themselves properly.
It's insanity.
The Ukrainians will have the same problem. How are you going to bring your armor over to the other side of the river? It's just not possible without a major breach.
Bless you. Yeah, everything's zeroed in. Like you say, they have at least 2, 3, even 4 lines of defense. When you leave the first one, it's zeroed in by artillery. That the first one, when they abandon it, it's going to get hit so hard. You have to go through all this and hit and reach Crimea, man. When I heard that, it kind of seems like a joke. But that's my opinion. You can go Meddy or Vaun.
I laughed my ass off because the 2nd Tamara Guards is in Crimea. They would be walking into a buzzsaw. There's a reason why they didn't try to go into Crimea before. It's because 2nd Guards Division was there, and they're still there. And that's what makes, I think, so funny is there is still an armored force down in Crimea that could deploy to Kherson. Will they make it across? Will they try it from there? Will they go from somewhere? I don't know. I still think it's coming from the region, not necessarily the city, but But I Dan and Mason, I am sorry. I get heated. This argument I've had so many times with so many different people, and I do lose my shit a little bit. So I want to tell you that was completely my fault. And PTSD is an issue. Sometimes, as you can see, it's not like I just kind of like, get back in my ear, you real me, choking the phone and stuff. And I don't mean to be doing that because you had valid points too. And I just couldn't. I was having a hard time getting my point across, and it made it worse.
It's okay. It's just another time. Don't worry. You already done it so many times. It's all right.
I would like to ask a question and kind of make a point as well. So we're talking about, if Ukraine can pull off this big offensive in Zaporizhzhia, right? Well, you look at Seversk right now, the fall of Solidar as well on the Bakhmut front. Russia is making these pushes in sectors that we know are being defended by the Ukrainians basically as hard as they are physically capable of defending them at the moment. I mean, Bakhmut, from both sides, it is the important battle, right? Where Ukraine is putting a lot of resources into it. And yeah, Russia's not taking Bakhmut tomorrow. They're definitely winning in this area. And they definitely have the upper hand. I think everyone, no matter what side they support or whatever, can say, right now, Russia's got the upper hand on that battlefield. So, say Ukraine gets this big Western-trained force, right? We still have this big Russian army that isn't committed to the battle yet. So instead of holding this force in reserve, like to me, if I was the Ukrainians, right, and I wasn't under political pressure from the West to get PR victories, but if I was just them trying to defend Ukraine, I would hold this force in reserve and use it as some force in readiness for a big Russian attack, right? Say the Russians come from Kiev. You can go up there and stop them with this credible armored force and this well-trained force. But if they waste it on Zaporizhzhia, I think at that moment or soon thereafter is when you might see a push from Belarus or a push, towards Sumy or somewhere like that, because that will be the only force Ukraine has left capable of doing that.
Yeah, it's the double-edged sword we were mentioning. If you expend that unit this way, you're now giving it up and cutting your own leg off. If you're using it for something that unusual, which I think is unusual, pushing somewhere like Crimea, it's so strange, man. It's like sometimes the plans that come out seem out of this world. I can't believe it.
I got a question for you guys on this because I liked what you said about that. There is a point now where we're seeing the Russians pushing here and still almost trying to retain these cities like Bakhmut and Zaporizhzhia. They kind of have to, but if that the Russians are just trying to ground you down, move yourself west, get away from them, get yourself some time, get yourself some distance, get yourself some way to drag them out and extend their lines to be attacked, instead of just sitting there getting bombarded constantly in a static line. It doesn't make sense to me. If they know the Russians want to annihilate them, make them chase you.
It just reminds me.
Russians done it several times throughout history.
I mean, if they wanted to use that armored force, especially since it's going to trickle in, the best thing they could do is just set up on the west side of the Dnieper and use that armored fist to react to wherever they try to cross in force. I mean, because they're not. I mean, if you use that armored fist to try to go to south, the amount of equipment that would have to support that to even push to the Metalopol, whatever, first, and I mean that would to me in my mind seems like it would take every single fuel truck they had, I mean, they would pull so much shit from everywhere else that there's no way the Russians would resist not making a move somewhere else. I mean, I think that's what happened in Zaporizhzhia the last couple of weeks. They saw them skimming troops off of there to send them to Bakhmut, and they finally figured out a spot that was weak, and they just made a little push. And the Ukrainians freaked out and sent everyone back down the other way, and now all of a sudden there's a big push around Bakhmut and Servesk and all that. So then if they start sending them back up there to deal with that, then all of a sudden they'll probably start pushing down south. I mean, like I said, they got the advantage. The Russians can move anything they want within probably 50 miles of the front line by air, rail, road, foot, however they want. Where the Ukrainians, it's like maybe they got a train, maybe they got fuel trucks, maybe they got, I mean, aircraft is suicide, obviously. But, I mean, the Russians can fly stuff in. All they have to do is stay outside the SAM envelope. They can move their trains around. They got all the power they want. They got all the gas they want. I mean, that's another thing that plays in their favor. They got all the time in the world. They can just drive their units around all over the place and let the Ukrainians chase them. And when they chase them here, then they go over there. I mean, there's just really no way for the armored fist thing for me should have been done in the beginning of the war, because that's the only time they had the air support and the artillery that they could have actually done something. They might have been able to scare the Russians enough to get them to stop. I mean, they stopped them around Kiev. Imagine if they had been able to destroy the First Guards tank army or do massive damage with a big push and a artillery strike and aircraft. They might have been able to convince the Russians to stop, but I just don't see that at this point having any kind of real good effect.
I just want to add,
being possible, really.
The Ukrainians cannot withdraw to the west of Dnieper River because the Russian objective, the Ukrainians surely know, is not to conquer the whole of Ukraine. So if you fall back to the west of Dnieper, you literally just gave Russia half the country, which actually the Russians want. So which is why even if they do withdraw to create more space for tactical movements, they cannot go that far because then they can never win back the war as well, because you cannot cross the river as well, just as the Russians cannot cross the river. So which is also why the bridges are all still up, because the Russians know that in case they need to use the bridges, in case it's there.
I wonder too if the Ukrainians did start a massive withdrawal, if the Russians would just drop the bridges to trap them, because they always say the goal is to destroy the army, so they can't really let them get away.
But the Ukrainians will come, because the Ukrainians' objective is kind of suicidal. They say
and that's what I was saying. I was trying to say earlier with Prigozhin. I mean, he's pretty much baiting the Ukrainians. He's like, "Yeah, come to Bakhmut, send whatever you want, come fight me." And it's like, if you want to come here and die, go ahead. We'll kill you here. We'll kill you there. We'll kill you wherever you want to be, basically. And it's like they're just taking the bait and going. It's like they don't.
And that's the worst part for Ukrainians. That's the worst part for the Ukrainians, because they have to put in so much forces to concentrate on Bakhmut, which is the Wagner forces, Wagner private military contractors, and they're not even fighting the actual Russian military. Imagine you're losing so much troops just to fight the PMC. And you haven't even engaged you haven't really properly engaged the real Russian army, which is actually operating along the Kharkiv-Luhansk border, which they also struggle to penetrate through. And then in Zaporizhzhia region, they also do not dare to do an offensive, because I heard that the Chechens was there previously a few months ago. Maybe they have rotated out. But where are you going to attack? which is why, like half a year ago, I was talking about, I think the Ukrainians should just go into Belgorod, like go to Bryansk, just attack into Russia. Because what's the point? That's the only weak spot in the Russian lines. You cannot actually attack any of the front lines now because everywhere is entrenched, just as bad as their own entrenchment. It's like both sides is heavily entrenched. If you play chess, all the chess are dead. All the chess pieces are dead. There's no place to attack. You have to attack where it's soft, and might as well just attack into Russia, because at least you are threatening Russia, and you bring pain into the Russian civilians, where maybe you can cause some changes. Or
Cause
of course,
some
you can also
emotional
get
damage.
worse, or it could become worse. It become a declaration of war. I mean, but what's the difference? It's the same, right? So,
yeah, but I mean, it's like if they're already taking all these gambles, so why not take that gamble too? It's like it might make some Russians be like, "Hey, what the hell are you all doing in Moscow?" Or it might be like, "These motherfuckers came in our country, we need to destroy them," But they really don't have any options. It's like you already rolled the dice, so you might as well keep rolling. I mean, they
Prove
can't
me
be wrong.
wrong.
I have a little bit of speculation to make, and I want to hear your opinions about it. So, you know how after announcing these tanks, all of these Western leaders go that all of these tanks are for defensive purposes. These are whatever. My point is, the way Ukraine has been using tanks, as Dan stated, is more like military vehicles for infantry. What do you guys think? Maybe this is just being sent just to prolong the war even more, to be used in urban combat rather than having a iron fist for Russians. Maybe it's just to prolong the war, just so they can survive a little bit longer, and maybe they're
That's why.
Yeah.
That's why I asked that question, because in my head, and I don't see the Ukrainians winning anymore, but I used to have a way for them to win in my head in my war game, but Wyatt just proved me wrong. And this is the first reason why I even started going on the open mic, because I was telling Wyatt, like, yo, these guys are doing everything wrong. And I was telling him, if they want to win, they should have done unconventional war, which is what Meddy said. I agreed with that. But if Russia just wants half of Ukraine up to the Dnieper, then unconventional war doesn't do anything besides facilitating the job for Russia. So these 200 tanks are just to prolong the war, obviously, because they're not going to win. They already lost any chance they could have used. They're not using them effectively. And if, like Wyatt said, they're just fighting the Wagner private military and the Chechens, and they haven't even fought the actual Russian army, then Jesus, man, it's a crap storm for them.
it's a nightmare.
I feel
right?
so bad. It's a nightmare,
yeah.
man.
Look at it this way, and I know this is going to contradict directly what open source intel is telling us, right, from their public statements about concentrating these tanks into battalions and using them like that. That's what we know openly. Ukraine hasn't done that with their armor since the first month of the war. It's always been in these little 2s or 3s. So even if they're saying that for administrative purposes, right, maybe the Zaporizhzhia front will have an armored battalion, but it's not. I don't think Ukraine is going to be able to really concentrate it. And I don't think, if they're intelligent, I don't think they will. And they haven't throughout the whole war. That's not how they've used their tanks. So it might be a bit anticlimactic to the whole topic at hand of, tank talk about Ukraine getting this Western armor. And I'm not just saying this to be like, oh, pro-Russian, they're going to chew this up. I don't think it's going to make a difference. It's basically just replacing T-72s that they've lost. Like, Abrams aren't magic. Leopard 2s aren't magic. They're not going to win the battle. Yeah, it's going to be better for the crewmen because it's a better tank than the previous one, right? But at the end of the day, if you're making a push with 2 or 3 tanks and like a BMP, it's still like a minuscule strike force. You're not going to achieve much with it. You see what I mean? It's like,
Yes.
It's just replacing their losses. This isn't some new factor being added into the war. I mean, we've seen the most advanced Russian tanks in the first months of the war being deployed, T-80 BVMs. Some people say, oh, it's not the greatest. Compared to anything Ukraine had, it had a crushing superiority. Did it win them the war? No. No, it didn't. So Ukraine getting these old Leopard 2s from the 90s or Leopard 1s from the 80s, it's not going to make a difference. Maybe on a very small level it will. But it's just making up for vehicles they've already lost.
That's why we're in the twilight zone, because I am in the belief that this is the truth. What you're saying is the truth, because it didn't make a difference, and I'm going to use my war, when we had night vision goggles, it didn't make a difference. What they would do is light the fields on fire, and it would blind us. So like, there's, just because you have technology doesn't mean you're going to be more effective. And giving it to the Ukrainians, who are famous for throwing it away in useless battles because of their leadership, you can clearly tell that it's not going to make a difference. But you have people on the BBC, the guy in Panelists, yes, the 200 tanks are going to make a big difference for the Russians, against the Russians, because, and he goes on and talks for 5 minutes how they're going to be a super weapon. And you're in the twilight zone, because if you go and search all these reporters, they're saying it's going to make a difference. But we know it's not. That's the scary part too, man. It's this information that they're throwing out there that it's so wrong. These guys are just going to throw it away, and they're going to be glorified transportation. Mark
Would
my
it
words.
be harmful for the West, or let's say UK, if Challengers are captured, if Leopards are captured? Can this technology be stolen, or does Russia already have it?
I think Russia already has it. But
I mean, I don't think if they're not getting the armor package, probably, let's say they don't get the armor package, so they don't get that advantage there. I think the main thing it would do is maybe give them ideas on how to lay a tank out. Maybe give them ideas on how to maybe miniaturize systems they have in their tanks. You know, like they could figure out how to make their thermal imager smaller, like the American one or the Leopard one or something like that, because they'd have one to sit there. They could literally just send it to the Chinese and have them copy. So I don't think they would gain tons of advantages in other than just, you know, maybe layout designs, you know, how it works. You know, then they could sit there and shoot at it until they find all the perfectly good weak spots that their ammunition would kill it. So
yeah, I don't think it makes a difference, because imagine the Russians has been developing the Armata for like 10 years, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
no, what would they have not known by now? Like, they have so many friends that are operating Western tanks. Who knows the Russians are already, you know, in Saudi Arabia, you know, shaking hands and taking a look at the latest Abrams. You know, nobody knows whether they have done this kind of thing. So it's
I would assume with the Russians in Syria and the fact that ISIS was using Iraqi M1s, I mean, they obviously don't have one in their possession, because if they did, it would be in Kubinka at the museum. But I wouldn't doubt that they've gotten at least to look at the inside and take pictures and at least study them some.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I mean,
I mean, it's in Iraq, right? So no.
Yeah, Iraq or Syria easily.
I'll tell you right now.
One into Iran.
I'll tell you right now. I bet you NATO would love to get a hold of a T-90 with an active ground effect radar on it, and an Armada.
Supposedly we got one, but I don't know what it had on.
Right. Yeah, and maybe they did, but the Armada with with that tube launch missile system that can reach out to 12,000 kilometers is just mind-boggling, as anybody is you guys can imagine, because it outdistances your main gun by almost 5,000 meters. So that means they can actively detect you and kill you before you can even think about even engaging them. That's if you even see them, and that's why that radar package is so deadly, because with the net-centric tanks they use, it could literally be a chopper designating a tank 7,000 meters out, and they just tell the Armada, launch your missile, and off it goes to wherever the designation is. And that's the type of warfare they're at right now. Right now, we, as far as I know, don't have anything in development yet like that.
I don't think, Aki, by the way, just to answer a little bit more of that question, I don't think that what we're seeing is like what we see now in the battlefield, it's not a danger if it's captured by both sides. I think that what you deploy into a battlefield is something that you can, how do you say the word? Risk getting captured and being looked at. When I got to Afghanistan, I had the first time I ever saw an Osprey helicopter was in Afghanistan, and I had been training. I'm like, whose airplane, whose shit is that? And they're like, that's ours. I said, why didn't we see it in America? And it was like 2010, 2011, and they're like, oh yeah, we don't train with them here. We use them over here. So the American people probably had never seen it. So only in Afghanistan would you be able to see it. So the battlefield can hide things, and it could also be a place where we don't throw our best things at. That's why I believe that if anything's captured by NATO on the Russian side, they won't learn something that's going to change or risk compromise Russia, and the other way around as well.
To be blunt,
don't.
To be blunt about the vehicles, I'm sorry, but like T90M, if you're talking about gun optics, like gun optics, thermals, all these technological systems, I mean, it's comparable to an M1A2 Set V3. It's not as good of a tank for simple layout reasons of the T72 design, right? It is more vulnerable than an M1A2, you know? I'm not saying that an M1A2 is going to beat it in engagement. The difference is marginal, but, you know, there is a difference. When it comes to these, like, little items in the vehicles, either side catching one of them, it's not really going to tell them much that they don't already know, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an advantage that they get to see what the other side has, and they can just pick it apart and study it, really. I mean, maybe get an idea where they're at in their tank, design technology versus you.
It's but I mean, curiosity thing, right? It's like, the previously, when the Soviet fighter pilots, they run away with their airplanes, and then the US military finally, take it apart. It was like they realized, oh, there's actually nothing special about the plane.
Yeah.
Like they overthink it, like they imagine and fantasize how powerful that plane is, because they never get to engage it, so they're not sure.
It was a very different era, Technology was moving very fast then. You had like what you're talking about, famously the MiG-25, right?
Yeah.
Flew, I think it landed in Japan or somewhere, right?
Yeah.
That was a whole new generation of fighter for a role that the United States didn't understand or have a comparable aircraft. You don't really see
they were
that
scared
anymore.
of it.
There's nothing like that besides maybe hypersonic missiles. That's probably the only thing on either side of this new Iron Curtain, right, that is really secret. Is Russia probably doesn't want the West to get a hold of a hypersonic missile. Pretty much everything else they're using, NATO has some sort of equivalent, and it goes both ways.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard that they captured a Ka-52 and they gave it to the United States, and I don't know what they'd learn off the Ka-52 other than it's nice to have one. Maybe
it's just an attack helicopter with good optics that slings long-range missiles. Like it's not super arcane,
I would choose,
unless they grab
the Apache anytime. Like I would anytime pick the Apache over the Ka-52. It's like, come on, man, Apache can go super.
Like I said, it would be more.
I don't know about that one.
In their capabilities, it would probably just help you understand the helicopter's capabilities, and then you could just develop counters to it. Is all.
Yeah, this isn't like the Cold War, Things are much closer.
How
can they don't even go to the front line? They're just firing from far away. They just shoot the artillery rocket kind of thing. Then they just fly away. You can't even engage them. They just fly away.
Yeah, you hardly. It's like I've only seen maybe a couple dozen AT shots from a helicopter on a vehicle. I mean, most of the time it's just rockets.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch of them somewhere in the archive, but I mean, it doesn't seem like you see very many, and then sometimes it's the same damn one 10 times on 10 different pages.
Yeah, I feel so cheated. I always understood that aircraft firing the rockets is always top down, like going this way.
Yeah.
Like then the Russians is like going upwards. It's like, what the? This entire war, I only saw it once. Like the plane flying downwards to firing rockets from the Russians only once. Like what the hell, man? It's like that means all the computer games that we play is all wrong.
Yeah.
Nobody.
The lob fire, they keep it outside of the range of the other missiles. Yeah. I was really surprised about that too. I was like, what the fuck are you? The ground's down here. Why the hell are you shooting up there, you dumb bastard? And they're like, oh, lob fire is what it is. Basically, it just makes a helicopter a grad in a way.
Russia's got the strongest military in Europe. They probably don't want to waste
No doubt.
20 years of buildup of all this. You got to understand, Russia's military budget, even when you account for the price differences, is peanuts compared to America.
Yep.
They've built this force, which no matter what anyone thinks, it is doing way more than it has any right to do. Like, Russia's military is doing way more than it has any right to do with the amount of money put into it. For all the jokes people can make about the performance, right?
I mean, I was thinking earlier.
You have like Su-57s and you got Ka-52s. You got all these expensive aircraft and expensive tanks. Man, if you got to lob rockets from 10 kilometers away or whatever and have jokes thrown at you, do it. Because, that $30 million helicopter, you're not going to get a new one because you lost it, at least not soon.
I just do not know what is the advantage to that versus like just use artillery, like use a grad rocket. No, it's just rockets. If you're not going to target accurately,
well, you have them. Might as well do something with them.
There was a video.
That's what I was thinking.
There was a video of these Ukrainian guys sitting in a trench, and they were getting fired at by Grads with the incendiary rounds, and they're sitting there, and the guy looks up, and you hear these rockets come in, you hear the pop, and all of a sudden you see all this burning incendiary stuff come down, and it started landing. It landed in their trench. Right, the guy was filming, and it was laying on the ground right in front of him, burning. And they're like, the point of view from a Grad hit, and it was just crazy to see that shit coming down. Everyone's like, "Oh, it's white phosphorus." It's like, it's not white phosphorus. It's just shit that burns.
Somebody asked that, by the way, Wyatt, on the group chat. What was the purpose of doing it the way the Russians do? And it brought up the point of indirect fire. And the more indirect fire you have on the battlefield, the more mental stress you put on the enemy, and they can advance. So when I saw them do it, I was also like, what's happening? But it came to me very quickly. I was like, oh, it's just IDF, and they're probably moving men up right now or gonna start mortaring trenches. And to me, like Mason said, if you have it, use it. And it's something that another force doesn't do, and it's just another form of IDF that is hell for the enemy. I would hate to have that on top of mortars, on top of artillery.
Well, to bring it full circle to what we're talking about, they do the same thing with tanks. I mean, I've seen so many videos of Russian tanks just lobbing IDF over a hill or something. I'm sure. I haven't read Western pubs, right? I'm sure that we got that in the manual. Man, the U.S. Army doesn't do that. You don't have U.S. Army tanks firing hundreds of HE rounds a day. Yeah, but like this every day.
No. I understand what you're saying, but we actually did practice it. Prearranged fire to if we were watching something or whatever, and it was night out or whatever, we would prearrange fire for the crossroads. Where any expected avenue they would come. And if the scout said, sector 4, 1A, but, look down, sector 4, 1A, use the azimuth, boom, and fire it. You're right, though. We hardly ever do it. The last time it was really done was a little bit in Vietnam, but it was really done a lot in the Korean War. You'll see them in the hills because they couldn't really use them for a lot of things. You'll see them. They're all on 45-degree angles, so they can give their tubes more flexibility because the tank tubes can't elevate high enough for it. So they have to build up the ramps for them. Yeah.
The only thing I remember them talking about that was they said that I think the M1 had if you super elevated the gun, had a max range of 24 miles. And we used to joke around about if we're on this one range, if you aimed a certain way, we were like, yeah, you could probably hit the psych ward at the hospital. So that's all we ever thought about doing with it as far as indirect fire. It's like shoot the hospital.
It seems
shoot
like
the psychos.
The only meme about the Russian army pre-war, the whole mass charges and all that, it's like the only thing that turned out to be really true was just overwhelming firepower. constantly. Every system they have, whether at the platoon level with small arms, mortars, tanks, literally everything. They just saturate the enemy with fire.
And think about it too, with all the captured stuff. I mean, now I've seen Russian infantry walking around with AT-4s and RPGs and Cornets. It's like they just keep adding firepower to their small units.
It doesn't make sense that they have sustained this much. I have never. I can't even imagine. I've tried to imagine how much they shoot, and it's unbelievable. You can't actually wrap your head around it. If you go by artillery, if you go by mortars, if you go by how much ammunition they expend on rounds, how much ammunition they expend on those fucking rockets on the helicopters, it's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable amount. And someone says, well, they must be running out in the group chat. And I said, man, but wait, if they already did one whole year of this, they must have planned for at least 2. Because if they thought that they would use it for a year, they must have planned for 2. And if they plan for 2, they have to plan for 3. So when and how much do they have? It's mind blowing. We've never seen this before.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, they've got the same gun calibers that they had under the Soviet regime, and they've been building 125 millimeter main gun tank rounds since the T-62 got a 125. So how many fucking shells have been made since what, 1963?
I know,
or
but
7.62 or 152 or fucking. I mean, that's what I'm saying. People don't even understand how much shit the Russians built before they became the Russians, and how much shit they've built since they've been the Russians.
And if they are really running out, definitely, you will see a massive reduction in intensity. So as long as you don't see a massive reduction in intensity, then definitely they still have a lot of stocks.
I mean, it has to be very big.
Yeah, because they definitely would not expend everything, and then you're left themselves stranded, right? So definitely they still have a lot until you really see a significant reduction. Like, we don't see that much caliber nowadays, like the caliber missiles. So maybe that's why they kind of like they expended a lot of these caliber missiles. So maybe they are rebuilding. Like we don't see much of Iskander. So maybe they have expended those, and then they are still now trying to replenish the stocks. So these are signs that they used up some of this ammunition. But if you talk about the artillery and tank rounds, it seems like they still have a lot.
I think the proper analysis is they're not using the Iskanders and stuff is because they don't have anything left to shoot them at. That's the narrative we should be saying, right?
I don't think so, because earlier on in the war, Russia was using them in a tactical role. Because when they had a lot of them, I mean, we have videos of like Ukrainian troop concentrations getting hit with an Iskander. Not a barracks, just like a group of Ukrainians in a village. They would not do that in a million years today. There's like no videos of that anymore. They're using
all like warehouses.
They're using like Hurricane S or stuff like this, right? Or Tornado S, whatever. They're using the more replaceable stuff. I do think they're running a little low of these guided long-range missiles.
I think they just build them in batches, and then they're just using them at That was my understanding, that they kind of are doing batches as they need them. Like if they want to shoot 200, they build a few hundred, then they shoot them, then they build some more, then they shoot them, then they build some more. But I don't think they're ever out. I just think they kind of run down the reserve, and then they build it up and shoot them.
I agree with you. But I don't think they have 10,000 lying around.
Oh, no.
No, I agree with you. I think that actually they may have
a few hundred, if that's still.
I would think that
200 at any one time.